Hi everybody, and welcome to our fourth and final MFest event of the day, Subverting Narratives with Nida Manzoor. MFest is a multi-arts festival of Muslim knowledge and creativity run by the charity Maslaha in partnership with the British Library. I'm Latifa from the MFest team, and I'm really excited to be able to introduce this event. First of all, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you use the menu above your screen to leave any feedback, that would be really helpful. It helps us to plan further events. Under your screen, you should be able to see social media links for Chrystal and for Nida, in case you want to carry on the conversation on different platforms after the event. You'll also see there under the screen an option to ask questions. So please do send in any questions during the event or towards the end of the event, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. We also welcome the brilliant Sumaya, who is doing our BSL interpreting, and we'll be trying, and that's a reminder to myself right now, to keep a slow pace during this conversation. So as I said, we're so excited to be hosting this event on subverting narratives. A really central part of MFest for us is about challenging crude and reductive narratives about Muslim and Black and Brown communities, which we are all, quite frankly, very tired of. So we're delighted to be able to explore this with Nida Manzoor and Chrystal Genesis. I don't know about you all, but I binge watched We Are Lady Parts when it was released last Thursday, and I'm among many, I'm sure, who are calling for season 2. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our chair, Chrystal Genesis. Chrystal is a presenter, producer, and arts and culture consultant from London, now living in New York. She runs and hosts Stance Podcast and has presented on BBC Podcast Radio Hour and BBC Front Row. She works as a producer for Neon Hum Media and previously produced the launch of a podcast series for HuffPost UK and worked as a lead programmer creating courses, workshops, and performance programs for young people aged 15 to 30 at South Bank Centre in London. Prior to working at the South Bank, Chrystal worked at BBC producing multi-platform arts, news and current affair content for Today programme, Women's Hour, The World at One, all on BBC Radio 4, as well as on a range of other channels in London and Washington, DC. Chrystal also works as an arts, culture and media consultant. So Chrystal, I will pass over to you.
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to get started right now, really. Nida Manzoor, I'm so happy to have you here. She's a prolific and award-winning writer and director. Her work has been commissioned for UK broadcasters, including BBC, Sky, Channel 4. Her latest show for NBC and Channel 4, We Are Lady Parts, which we just heard about, was released this week to such critical acclaim, which we'll talk a little bit more about. The show, which she wrote, is a daring music comedy about the trials and tribulations of an all-female Muslim punk band. She has also directed episodes for the iconic Doctor Who series, which is super exciting. And again, I'm so happy that you're here joining us. Firstly, I have to start. How are you, and how did it feel seeing your show go out, We Are Lady Parts?
Thanks, Chrystal. It's so exciting to be here. It's such a pleasure. It was terrifying. I don't know, but also it just felt like such a release, because it's really been 5 years since I've had the idea until now. So just a lot of work has gone into it, and a lot of people have helped make it and shape it. So it felt like an exciting thing to finally get to share.
And tell me, who were you with? Who were you chilling with when you watched it? Were you with your family or your like mates, or were you like half watching it and half like covering your eyes?
We did a cast and crew screening where I had all the people I made it with, which was really nice. But then when it actually came out, I was with my parents, my brother who helped write the songs and scored the show. I was with my partner. And then just like a group of like very close friends. It was quite a small circle of people who I could panic in front of, essentially.
Definitely. And as I said, you've had so many great reviews. I just picked one, which was in The Guardian, which has said, we've not seen anything like this on mainstream British TV. A comedy in which Muslim women are permitted to be funny, sexual, ridiculous, religious, angry, conflicted, and basically themselves, right? And they also talk about one song of Lady Parts, which is "Nobody's gonna honor kill my sister but me." So basically, people are seeing this is the first time they've seen this on mainstream telly. Tell me about how you felt when I don't know if you've read that or heard of that, but that's a pretty big statement in, one of our most popular newspapers. Were you surprised by that? Were there things that inspired you as well when you think back? Or, it's fantastic. It's a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, when I came up with the idea, it was sort of out of a place of frustration because I was seeing these narratives of Muslim women as oppressed, lacking agency and selfhood. And, I wanted to reflect the women I knew, the friends I had. As you said, I really wanted it to be a comedy because I feel like one of the things that, Muslim, the way that Muslim people are presented in the media is very serious and very solemn, like without any joy or laughter. And I feel like that is such a, core fundamental part of being a human, and that I feel really binds people. So I really wanted it to be a comedy. I've been inspired by a lot of other Muslim creatives around me. So it's interesting when they say something like, "Oh, we've not seen this before." I have seen it a lot in my friends, in the creatives around me. So it feels exciting to get to have the opportunity to bring those people that I love onto the screen.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just for everyone to be able to really see it and take it in. And I really hope this is just the first of so many others. But I think we've been talking about it, and I think it makes sense just to play a bit of the trailer for those who haven't been able to see it yet. So do you want to just give a really tiny introduction to the trailer, if that's okay?
No, absolutely. So the show is called We Are Lady Parts. It is a music comedy following, as you said, the trials and tribulations of an all-female Muslim punk band as they try and find a lead guitarist. And who they end up recruiting is Amina Hussein. She is a PhD student looking for a husband, but she finds herself getting drawn into the world of this band.
1, 2, 3, 4! This is Lady Parts, a confused mix of anthems and sour girl power. An unstoppable force.
We need lead guitarist.
Soon to meet me. 26, Capricorn, finishing a PhD in microbiology.
Knock, knock.
Things were about to change. Big time.
She's the one.
You're in a punk band.
Our music is about representation. It's about being heard.
Well, you should wash your hair if you want to be heard.
Let's roll.
Thank you so much for that. It's such a cool, sexy, clever, hilarious show. It's brilliant. But I want to go into the characters because you talked about them trying to find a lead guitarist. Tell me a little bit more about each character and maybe how you wanted to kind of fill them out before you, gathered all your actors and stuff. Tell me a bit about those early days.
Absolutely. The story really follows Amina Hussein. She's at the heart of it. And really, I think ultimately for me with her was wanting her to go on a journey where she finds her voice or finds confidence in speaking her truth and sort of occupying all the different sides of herself. She can be a woman who wants love and to be settled and have a husband, but she can also be a badass, punk guitarist. I think on the other side, it's Syra, who is the lead singer, this enigmatic front woman. And for me, with Syra, I wanted to capture a sort of fury and a tormented artist that I'd seen so much in my own family, women in my family. And I really wanted to honor the anger, the female rage that sometimes we don't also get to see, especially we don't really get to see it with Muslim women, who have been traditionally portrayed as, again, oppressed and and lacking agency. Whereas, you know, Zaira's character for me was one where I really wanted her to have, you know, anger and own it. And we get to see her dark sides, and we get to see her joy and her cruelty. That was exciting to me. Again, Bisma, who plays the bassist, she's British Nigerian. She is, you know, this fierce bassist punk, but also, you know, is a mother and has like quite a loving family unit. And again, that was wanting to show a family, and a sort of a joyful family full of love and creativity, as well as this woman is a punk and is, you know, fury. But for me, Bisma, what was exciting about her is that I think her spirituality, she brings such a different energy to the group. There's a lot of anger in the women. But Bisma is the sort of peacemaker, the sort of almost, the figure of calm in the band. Who else? Momtaz is the band manager. She's a Niqabi. She is a force to be reckoned with. For me, with her, it was about, again, showing a character full of agency. She's the one, which, without giving any spoilers, who, you know, really brings the band to their ultimate success. That's not a spoiler. And for me, I wanted to show, again, a character who we see wearing a niqab, but we never really get to see much of her face, or we don't show her face, but we get, and for me, it was important that you could fall in love with this character. You could get so much from her without having to see her. And, you know, that was something that I was really excited to show. And yeah, and who else have I?
Yeah.
Oh, Aisha the drummer. How could I forget Aisha?
I even forgot the drummer. You're so terrible. That's so typical, isn't it? Forgetting the drummer.
I know. No, you can't forget Aisha. I mean, Juliette Mohamed, who plays Aisha, is like the coolest person. She's an iconic human. Again, just another, for me, it's exciting to find women who could have different, could really play to the band dynamics. Because I actually really love band films and band TV shows.
Yeah.
Something about the egos in a band that is so delicious. That was really fun to look at with the characters.
Yeah, and you definitely have it, as you said, with the lead singer, and we talked about sort of female rage, which again is something that really hasn't been explored like so much at all. And we're talking about subverting narratives, and I want to talk a couple of things really. So firstly, that what inspired the show. I'd like to talk a bit about that firstly, and then I want to ask you a little bit more about why you think comedy is such a good place to be able to do this. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about like what inspired the show, please, and that connection to kind of subverting narratives, which you're obviously doing and looking at in your work. But yeah, tell me a bit more about if it was very intentional in that way, or.
Yeah. I mean, the inspiration for the show is so wide, it's so vast. Part of it is my own family. As I mentioned, I grew up in a very musical household. My dad got me a guitar when I was 8 years old, and that became quite a cornerstone of my identity. I was very much like Amina into like folk music, American folk music, just really cringy stuff. Whereas my older sister was essentially, you know, a punk spirited person. And she also had a big influence on me. I don't know if any of the audience, you know, was one of those brown kids or black kids who was into kind of alternative punk music and kind of not really feeling like that was for you. A lot of the excitement for me in writing the show was to be like, this is also for us. This is all for us. As you'll see, there's some big songs that were so important to me in my childhood that I've featured in the show. In terms of other inspirations, like I said, there's a lot of really amazing artists and creatives I was coming across, both just in London at various events. Big shout out to Macrew, run by Simon, the Khalid brothers. They're amazing. These poetry nights, you know, for young Muslims who would come together and just explore the different aspects of their identity. And I was really inspired by that. I was really inspired by how, you know, this space for these young poets really allowed them to kind of show the light and the dark and really kind of inhabit all sides of themselves. And that's really one of the things that was inspiring to me, is like, I wanted to show these Muslim women, brown and black women, and center them, but for as many shades as I could. You know, it's not just that they're good they're good women behaving well, whatever that means, they are struggling with their, battling their own demons and stuff. So yeah, those were the influences. Don't know if I've answered your question.
Oh, that's perfect. No, that's really, really good. And I just want to know a bit more about, what type of work, like, well, how did We Are Lady Parts come together? Was it was obviously your like main idea, but did you have to like pitch it to a lot of people? Also, I'm really interested. I think the commissioning process is fascinating, especially when we talk about narratives, because the thing is, even if we come up with amazing ideas, if we still have similar gatekeepers, then we'll still have issues. So I want to know a little bit more about the idea of like getting this commissioned, and then also what things were kind of landing on your lap before, and did that again, was that another reason why you had to make this show?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bit strange for me because I am a comedy writer. Like, my sort of place of comfort as a writer, where I feel like I'm most in touch with my voice, if you can say such a thing, is doing comedy. So it was interesting when I was really new taking meetings. Sometimes I was being asked to write drama about, like, the sort of sensationalized narratives of what it means to be a Muslim woman. Again, the sort of playing into this idea of oppression. And I was confused. I was like, well, all my scripts are comedy, yet this is what they want. And I remember feeling that deep sense of frustration of like, the industry only wants this kind of representation, and I don't want to give that. That was frustrating. And that for me was a catalyst to come up with something that I felt really allowed me to lean into what I wanted to say. And that's where We Are Lady Parts kind of started to take shape. I did something which you usually don't do when you are trying to get a project away. What I did was I create a pitch doc myself. Oftentimes you get a commission, you take an idea and they pay for you to sort of do that. But because I really wanted I wanted it to be specific in the way I imagined it. So I created a very like detailed pitch doc with character breakdowns, with story ideas. I had mood boards of different people that I'd seen who I think really kind of encapsulate the sort of vibes of the characters. I had tone references to different TV shows, different films, to be like, this is what I wanted to make. And having that document just meant I could go, when I was doing my meetings with different production companies, I could just show them that. And anyone who was like, it's a bit silly. It's like, yep, it's silly. If you don't want silly, nope. Or go somewhere and they'd be like, do you think that there could be a bit more sort of darkness with this? When people started to be like trying to get in, or like trying to twist it to something I didn't want it to be, or that was out of my kind of voice, I was like, no, okay. So that document just really allowed me to find the right people. As soon as I came across Surianne Fletcher-Jones at Working Title, and she was like, yep, let's make this. I was like, cool, okay. Actually, then getting Channel 4 on board it took them a while to read it, because these broadcasters get so much stuff. So I think I was waiting like a good 6 months from when we sent in the pitch doc and the script. I'd actually written a script as well at that point, and I'd written a song with my sister. So we had like all this stuff ready to like present. It took 6 months before they even were like, oh, yeah. Okay, you can do a pilot. So it was a long process, but I was so like, I want to make this how I want to make this. It empowered me to just say no a lot. It wasn't very comfortable for me, especially as a new writer, and you kind of want to say yes where you can, because every yes feels like an exciting thing. But because I wanted this to be true to my vision, I was quite kind of strict with who I would go with to make it.
Yeah, that's so interesting, you talking about that process as well, because a lot of the time you'll just think, maybe I should change it a bit, because you might not have the confidence, or just think, this is my only chance. But actually you think being super clear on your idea and then taking that around was actually just such a good thing. Were there a point where you were like, oh, would anyone take this? Was there moments when you were really tempted to sort of maybe just change it a bit and go down, as you said, a bit of darker side of a character, which again is like, that, as you said, the fact that they wanted a comedy writer to do drama is so bizarre. And I know it's so bizarre, but were there times where you thought, maybe I should just do this?
I'm trying to think back. I think with this, I was pretty much like, no, this is how it's going to be. I was open though, because it's one thing to not, I'm interested when someone has a better idea than me to be like, oh, cool. So sometimes when I was having meetings with people who were like, oh, how about this? And I was like, oh yeah, that could add something. I was trying to stay open to still allowing the idea to evolve if I thought an idea was cool. But it was very clear when you just don't want to work with people who are trying to make you into something you're not. It's quite like, I care so much about this, and to have this person come on board who I'm struggling to even like deal with right now, is like, it's not gonna happen. So in a way, yeah, with other ideas where maybe I was like less invested, like, yeah, okay, I can change that. Whereas like, I don't, having something that I cared about so much was actually really empowering, because yeah, this project, it didn't allow me to be blasé, you know what I mean? Don't know if that's clear.
No, definitely. I totally understand. And it just goes to show like sticking to your convictions, and also just knowing what you just know when you've got a really good idea, a really sick idea. And that's proven by people that love it and all the amazing reviews. So I'm really happy that you didn't go with that at all. But again, this is called Subverting Narratives. And tell me, how do you think comedy works in terms of subverting narratives? It's your art form, it's your choice, that you decided to pursue, not drama. And so yeah, tell me a bit about that, how that fits and why you chose comedy as a way for you to sort of tell stories.
Yeah, I think comedy has always spoken to me as an individual, growing up, because I loved comedy. I felt like sometimes when I feel like a story is trying to preach to me, or is trying to there's a kind of worthiness, it's sometimes as an audience, I get put off by that. I like it when they make me laugh. Like for me, when someone makes me laugh and can tell me something interesting at the same time, that is such an exciting feeling. I think it was that really drove me to comedy, was just, it is kind of how my voice, I early days, I was trying to get kind of writing credits, and I was writing, I did like a you have these like trial scripts to get onto EastEnders, like all the soaps and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do an EastEnders script. And they send you like all this information of, storylines. These are the characters. Now you just have to basically write this script. So I was trying to write the script, and I just ended up writing a comedy. And they was like, we really liked your script, but it's not EastEnders. It's some sort of sitcom. We're like, what? No, I was like, okay. So I can't do that. And also just being, my parents are incredibly supportive, but they were, wanting me to be like a lawyer or a doctor and stuff. So, when you've disappointed your parents, you might as well go all the way and just do the thing. Like, if I'm going to have done this, I'm not going to write a serious drama that really is fun to write. I'm going to write a comedy. You might as well just you're already there. You just go, you just keep going, just write a comedy. Yeah, but actually for me, comedy has a power, I think, of bringing people in who may not come in. If people are like, oh, this is going to be worthy, but actually you're making people laugh, it kind of allows, the laughter just breaks the ice and brings you in. And I think also the joy that comes with laughter is such a lovely, warm feeling that when someone comes in, you can then change the tone and maybe be a bit more dramatic or say something a bit more serious. And it can land a bit harder because you've brought in that audience even closer, I think.
Definitely. No, for sure. And you've talked about your parents, who are obviously so happy right now. I bet they're showing you off the whole time. If you were my daughter, I'd be showing you off the whole time. I want to go back to the beginning, because you talked a little bit about them, but tell me a little bit about where you grew up, and you talked about music as well. Your dad getting you a guitar when you were about 4. So yeah, tell me a bit about your house. Where did you grow up? What was it like? What were the kind of sounds and the smells, and tell me a bit more about it, and your sister as well.
And my sister and my brother. So I was born in London, and then I grew up in Singapore till I was 10, and then we were back here. We're sort of between. We went to Pakistan quite a lot to visit family out there, and just my household was very much filled with films, TV, music, poetry. So if it could be anything from Qawwali music, my dad was really into. My dad plays harmonium and sings kind of classical Pakistani music, or he's also very much into like Blackadder and comedies. So just, it was such an eclectic household. I think back now, and he was into Paul Simon, but he was also, we're listening to Abdul Praveen. It had this real kind of mix of influences at home. And like my grandfather was also very encouraging of my writing. When I'd see him in Pakistan, he'd always read all my like teenage angsty poetry and like stories and
Oh, I love your grandfather. That's so sweet that he like gave you that time when he was probably like
send me these letters. I still keep them. That are like, one day if you keep trying, you'll be a really good writer. I was like, so yeah, that was the household. And my brother and my sister are both musicians and are both incredible like singers and stuff, and I think it's just in our family. So when we wrote the music for the songs together, so it was really nice. It was kind of probably one of the most enjoyable aspects of making the show, was getting to work with my siblings and write the music, especially because we could turn around to my parents and be like, you said it didn't work, it couldn't be a job, and check us all out writing music for a show. That was fun.
That is amazing. Yeah. So who was involved in the process of the score?
So Shez, my younger brother, Shez Manzoor, he wrote the score and wrote the songs with me. Sanya, my older sister, also is an incredible songwriter. And my brother-in-law, Benny, in Germany, was also kind of overseeing the punkness of our stuff. So there's a lot of us.
And I loved when you talked about that, how you said, like kids like us, growing up all around the world, but like, in the UK, and just loving punk music and just loving alternative and rock and roll. Tell me a little bit more about why you wanted that to be so central. Obviously, it's completely central to the series. Tell me a bit more about that and how that came around. Was that the first idea, or was the first idea, I want to make this? Tell me a bit about that.
I mean, the punk element came in quite early. I think there's something about like the punk genre as being both kind of loud and very much unapologetic and having something to say, but also having a kind of cheekiness and a lightness, a sense of humor, which I think is really fun. It was those things that really drew me to say, like, wanting to make it punk. Also, I wanted the characters to play instruments. There's the kind of physicality of like, using your bodies in being together and making music together in a very physical way, I think is just really cool to watch. And also it's again showing these women like owning their bodies, which again is not something the stereotype is again of someone, Muslim women is not having kind of agency even within their bodies or control. So like just pushing back against all these stereotypes was something I wanted to do, and punk kind of let me do that. I just really love guitar music as well, so I was like, it was gonna happen.
Great. And then also really quickly, actually, before I forget, tell me about the creative industries as well. How did you get into the creative industries?
The creative industries is a minefield. I studied politics at uni. I didn't do film. I didn't train, formally or anything. I was part of the film society at my university. So I was making shorts sort of like ad hoc whilst doing my degree. When I graduated, I kind of knew no one in the industry. So what I did was I started going to the BFI because they had like a youth group, which was run under this guy, Noel Goodwin. I think he's still there. And it was basically for 15.
He is still there. You're right. He is still there. That's so funny.
They had these like free courses for 15 to 25-year-olds to like train in film. So I was doing that. They had like this festival as well. So I was helping curate that. I was just there. And then in terms of work, I applied, I sent like my CV round, which had nothing on it except for the BFI youth thing. And I sent it around to like everywhere in Soho, all the post houses, everywhere I could. I just took it around, even places that weren't film. I got a job as like a photographer's assistant. I was like, this isn't what I want, because they just were like, okay, you. So I just sent it out to everywhere. And then I got my first job as a runner in a post house in Soho. So that was just making tea really, and running tapes around. But it was cool because it felt like I was sort of adjacent to the industry. You'd get directors come in and be editing, and you could sit in and like sometimes they'd be like, hey, look at the scene, and that was really cool. But what was great being there is that there was a young woman there who was a director's assistant, and I was like, I want to be a director. She's a director's assistant. So I was like, took her for a coffee and I was like, so how do you get to be a director's assistant? And then soon she was like, oh, she's actually leaving the job. So she kind of recommended me for it. But I was also just making short films at the same time as being a runner. I made one, and I was sending them out to festivals. One of them got into quite a good festival, and that helped. That meant that Film London kind of caught wind of it, and they then funded my second short film, which was sort of had a bit of a budget. They kind of I'm not sure if they still had it, but it was like for BAME filmmakers, and it kind of gave me like 15,000 to make my film, and those short films really helped me kind of hone the tone of my filmmaking. So those were the sort of my first steps into it. Then I was sort of got an agent actually once I got into this Channel 4 screenwriting course called 4 Screenwriting, which I would highly recommend. I think it's still going. I've submitted a script to that and I got on that, and that really helped me get an agent. And I think having an agent, I realized, is so crucial to like moving and getting those next jobs.
Yeah,
it opens doors. Yeah.
Great. No, that's so interesting, and thank you for telling us as well, because a lot of people just think you have to do like, you have to study film, you have to like do a master's in film, you have to do all of that, but actually it's not necessarily like that. And actually, if you're like a grafter and you take loads of opportunities that are out there, that you can get there as well. So that's actually really, really good to hear. But I think we should talk about Doctor Who as well, because it would be wrong to not give that a bit of space. Tell me about Doctor Who. Were you always a fan? How did that all happen? That's so exciting. Tell us a bit about that.
Thanks. No, I wasn't always a fan. I know you shouldn't really say it, but I remember when I went in for my interview, at that point, I had directed a full TV series for BBC Three called Enterprise, sort of written and starring Coyote Owumi. So I had that sort of job experience under my belt. So when I went in, that's where I was career-wise. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this. I haven't done anything of this scale. And I was actually quite open with them. I was like, I love sci-fi. I love genre. Action is my fave. Aliens, yay. But the truth of it was like, I'm not a Whovian. I haven't been brought up on Doctor Who. I watched the recent series and they were cool with it. I think what was exciting about Doctor Who and the showrunner, Chris Chibnall, was I think they wanted to kind of refresh the sort of the vibe of the show. So although I had like massive imposter syndrome, I remember walking into the studio and it's like the biggest space I've ever stood in and being like, oh my God, I can't do this, and having that constantly every day. But it was great because when I actually started doing it, I was like, oh, I can do this. It's basically like directing a short film. The job is the same, but the scale is bigger. You just have way more people. But it was definitely part terrifying, but like an extremely important learning curve for me in terms of how, working with people, being communicative, but also kind of sort of helped me sort of realize like what I like to do, because I was shooting in a kind of the Doctor Who style, and it just helped me like, oh, I think I'd like to do, if I did my own thing, I'd do it this way, or I really like this lighting, oh, I'd keep that, and it just really allowed me to sort of figure out who I was and what my style was.
Yeah, definitely. And it would be lovely as well if we could just see a little clip as well. And then I want to ask you afterwards, when we've watched this, a dream show that you'd like to make. I know that's very hard, but we'll give you like a few seconds while we watch Doctor Who and your work, so you get time to think about it. Thank you so much. Also, another thing that I'd say to everyone who's here, please remember, if you have any questions for Nida, just store them up. And as you can see, actually underneath, you should be able to input some questions. So please do that, because we'll get to them in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So yeah, please do. But yes, I want to know, what is the kind of dream show that you would like to make? That you haven't, so it can be something that's already out there that you would like to actually, or it could just be something like fresh and new, like you did with We Are Lady Parts.
Ooh, oh my gosh, that is such a good question. On the one level, making Lady Parts has made me realize that I really love to create worlds myself. And actually, having done Doctor Who, aliens and spaceships are the coolest. Like going into work and being like, I think the alien spaceship should be green, because I saw it in the Matrix, it was like this, but I think we should do it more like that. It was, or like, how many tentacles does the alien have? I don't know why this kind of thing just really makes me happy. So I want to do aliens, that's for sure. But I want to do them with Muslim characters, with like brown and black people, just kind of the diverse stories, and the sort of bringing the diverse narratives to that big genre is something that I quite find like really exciting. I don't know what the exact idea would be, but I definitely would love to play more in like sci-fi action. I think.
Oh, no, definitely. And as I said, this is called Subverting Narratives, and I want to talk about narratives that you think need to go. Now, do you think I'm really harsh when I say need to go? Do you think some of them have already been like rinsed so much, they're like super harmful? Tell me ones that you think should go, or do you think that's the wrong way of looking at it?
That's a really interesting question, and something that I've thought about quite a lot. Because for me, I would hate to say a certain narrative needs to go. For me, it's like, who is saying this? You could say on the one hand, for example, oh, I've seen the kind of overbearing father, Muslim father. I don't want to see that anymore. However, if a Muslim writer is like, well, I want to look at my relationship with my dad, and guess what? It is difficult. Why, I don't think that we should be crossing out narratives that you might have seen, because it depends, like, it's who's saying it, what truths are they bringing to it, and I feel like the culture now is quite difficult, because there's sometimes this impulse to shut people down if it doesn't speak necessarily directly to us. And for me, it's really thinking about, is this person speaking from a place of vulnerability and truth? And if they are, we should really honor that. Yeah, don't know if that answers your question.
No, it really does. No, definitely. And I suppose I want to ask you as well, just to end on this actually before we open it up, the Q&A. Do you have any tips? Because I'm sure there'll be lots of people here who would love to have a job that you have. I'm not even like a comedy obsessive, but I would love to do something like what you do, because it's so fun. Obviously it's hard work, sorry, I don't want to minimize or anything. But give us tips for making work, really, or just to get into it. It can be different stages as well, because obviously you come across different roadblocks and things like that, especially if you are black and brown. I think TV still has a bit of a rep for being quite slow. So yeah, tell us a bit about that, so to really, tips, just not in terms of just like making work, but also how to make sure that we stay true to what we think is, solid, interesting ideas, but then also wanting to sort of learn along the way at the same time, looking after yourself in these industries, because it can be very tough, can't it, in sort of media creative industries?
Yes, it can be very, very tough. It's hard to break in, and it sometimes it requires a lot of luck. I feel like I was very lucky. I feel also that, had I been trying to make the show even a few years ago, I'm don't think I would have been able to. Like, I felt like, the timing, again, the luck of that was really fortunate for me. But in terms of practical steps that I would say, just as someone, if you haven't got any kind of industry connections, it's things like this. It's going to the BFI, looking at schemes. I think I came through a lot of these sort of schemes, funding schemes, opportunities, like, as I mentioned, Channel 4's for screenwriting, which is where I met the exec. It was like my first bit of screenwriting training, and one of the speakers who came to tell us about it, who's a Channel 4 commissioner, ended up being the producer I worked with on the show, 5 years later. So trying to do those schemes, BBC Writers Room has a website where I would kind of look every week to see what script competitions, script things are there, and enter stuff and don't overthink it. I think just trying to kind of just get those first little kind of commissions and little kind of bits of access that was, for me, was really important. If you can, try and make things. I think, as a pure filmmaker, making short films really allowed me to figure out what I liked and what I was good at, and if I actually liked directing. Because, directing is a tough job, and it's also not a lot of fun. So you might realize that you don't want to be a director, but you still want to be a creative or want to enable creatives, because we also need more commissioners. That commissioners at channels are gatekeepers. They're the ones who get to say yes, no. And sometimes you still feel like you're coming up with like, oh, we've got our one Muslim show, or we've got our one show that deals with young Black women, so we don't want that show. Whereas like if we have more diversity in our commissioners, the people who actually get to say yes, those are they can be like, no, this isn't just another Black show or another Muslim show. This is different because of you can have that kind of power to speak. And again, so that's also where we need like producers and commissioners, where it's like facilitating work.
Definitely.
Yeah, I have so much advice. I suppose if there are any specifics.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and you're right. We basically just need to be everywhere. We just really need to be everywhere. I liked what you said about directing. That was quite funny. Well, I'm just going to go to the questions now. We just have a question, which maybe it's just a little bit more specific. So if you've just got literally a couple of points on this question, what tips do you have for first-time filmmakers or independent movie makers? And they're loving the talk. But yeah, so let's just maybe just look at independent movie making. Any things that come to mind, early stages of career?
Independent movie making. I think maybe this is what you might already be doing in terms of like finding a crew and a kind of group of creatives who you can work with. One of the things I didn't have was, what you might get at film school is, a team. But then what I ended up doing was going to London Short Film Festival I love, and watching lots of shorts and just writing names down of people whose work I liked. Like, oh, I love the cinematography in that short, writing them down, and messaging, emailing those people, being like, will you make movies? Will you make a short film with me? And like finding that sort of network. And in terms of, there is the kind of admin element that I just think we've got to do and kind of getting good at is sort of applying for funding, applying for Creative England, applying to the BFI, Film London, and just seeing what pots of money are out there and just trying to kind of access them. And if you're a creative and like a director like me, that's not our skill set always, so you might want to find a producer. And again, finding producers, it's like trying to tap into those festivals and events and meeting people there. And for me, I think it was trying to create that network. I'm not sure what stage this person is at. You might be kind of already got your network and trying to get funding. If you're there, just like, again, trying to identify the right person within, say, the BFI whose sensibility matches yours. And that could just be from watching them in interviews. Okay, this sounds like really stalkerish now, I realize.
Not at all. You're sounding like a journalist. No, I'm joking. That's what you have to do though, right? You have to be approaching people, and it does get easier. and also one thing I'd quickly add to that is if someone doesn't get back to you straight away, it's not necessarily because they're not interested, it's just because they've probably got like 1,000 emails and stuff. So don't be put off by that at all. We have lots of questions. Okay, so let me just go to this one. Commissioners say that you should have 4 to 5 ideas to hand. Did you have other ideas to pitch to production companies, or were you just like really determined to make We Are Lady Parts? Thank you, Zane.
That is a really good question. Before We Are Lady Parts, before I was like pitching that around, I was similarly like having 4 or 5 ideas. But what I realized was that they were all the same sort of idea dressed up in a different way. which, all the ideas would sort of allow me to just like the core of what was, it's, a sister relationship, or it would be, tensions between women, intergenerational tensions, but this one is a sci-fi and this one is a this, and for me, as long as there are things I could passionately speak about, I was happy to pitch them. But when it came to when I was making We Are Lady Parts, I was basically saying this meeting is for this one show. And I think that was different. But before that, I was getting, pitch commissions, and it was very much coming with a kind of arsenal of ideas. But I was secure because all the ideas I was bringing at that stage were things I could get really excited about if I got to make them. Just like go through it, and it's almost go through your list and be like, if somebody actually was going to pay me to write this, would you be like, oh no, then just chuck it. If it makes you not feel excited, if you're going to get, you've got to just be really brutal with your ideas. And if you're like, oh, I actually need a bit more, sometimes just, commissioners get a bit like, you can throw a bit of glitter and be like, ooh, and it's set in this exciting place. But as long as you get to still look at the thing that you really care about, that's what you've got to hang on to.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also, just literally 1 minute, actually, I think it would be good if we quickly go back to the first time filmmakers and independent movie making question from Rima, because I remember when we were having a pre-chat, you mentioned an amazing web series, and I think it's probably worth really quickly talking about web series, because if we look at Issa Rae's Insecure, which is now HBO, this is also a really interesting way, right, that people can really like be heard, be seen. But it'd be really good if, you mentioned East of La Brea, which is about Muslim American women, working class Muslim American women. But yeah, just a little bit about, what you think about the power of web series.
Yeah, I fully believe in the power of web series. As you're saying, East of La Brea, Issa Rae's show, Insecure, started off as her, YouTube series called Awkward Black Girl, which was her just basically doing her rap and being funny. And essentially Insecure is like a kind of an expensive version of that. So, and even when I was working with Coyote Wumi on Enterprise, he got this BBC commission after his web series, which name I'm blanking on.
And we also have Brown Girls, which is the American comedy web series by Fatima Asghar as well, and Sam Bailey, which is doing really well. So yeah.
Oh, you're so right. YouTube web series, that is such an amazing tool right now. It's hard to cut through, but I feel like, you will, if you can connect with it, you'll find your audience.
Definitely. And we have a question as well. There are bits of surrealism in the show, and that's something you used before in your other work, I think. How do you think surrealism and comedy works as a way to subvert narratives and stereotypes? Amazing question, by the way. I should have had that one. I'm joking. That's a really good question. So tell us, how do you think surrealism and comedy works as a way to subvert narratives and stereotypes? And also just talk a little bit more about surrealism in your work.
Yeah. The surreal moments, the kind of heightened moments, are a kind of window into the lead character, Amina Hussein's sort of inner life. It allowed me to give us access to her kind of dreamland. And for me, it was just an exciting way to show her imagination. There's a lot of surrealism in the show, and I think there's some bits. For me, even as an artist, it allowed me to access quite painful things if I could kind of look at them myself through a lens of comedy. As again, spoilers, but there's some surreal stuff that happens towards the end of the show, which is again like a comedy set piece, but it allowed me to it felt like I felt more comfortable just as a creative, like to speak when I was sort of joking about it, that is what I would say, the power of surrealism. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I don't really even think about that. I'm just like, oh, is this funny? I can be quite basic about certain things, like, oh, I love, I'm just like, is this, is this like silly? The silliness, the playfulness of it, I think is powerful because we just don't get to see that with certain narratives.
Yeah, well, you've answered it as well, anyway, as you talked about that, but thank you. And another question as well. We've been consuming a lifetime worth of popular media. So given that, how do we avoid breaking stereotypes the new stereotype, especially when writing characters who are Muslim women? That's also a really good question. It just goes to show, doesn't it, these sort of these things that we have to think about as different communities the whole time. But it is a good question. I'll just repeat that again. How do we avoid breaking stereotypes the new stereotype, especially when writing characters who are Muslim women?
That's a really good question. How do we avoid it? How do we avoid it? You know, it's an interesting question, because one of the things that I realized people saying to me is just like, oh, you're breaking all these, you're just there, just breaking stereotypes. When you're writing from a place of like truth or excitement, you're just like, oh no, I just want to speak truthfully about the things that I know or certain things that I love. And it's not necessarily always about breaking stereotypes, because some of my characters don't break stereotypes, and sometimes, some of them do. There's a kind of variety of characters doing different things. So sometimes it's almost just kind of letting go of whether or not you're working in a stereotype or not. And just because I think when you can show complexity or truth to a character, how they move through the world will be truthful. And yeah, that's kind of what I was always trying to connect to again when I was writing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. And also, it's really difficult if something, it's breaking stereotypes is sometimes maybe what other people would say. It's not necessarily what you would necessarily say as well. And also a lot of the time, so I think my point is, I think to be able to also not to fall into that trap, I think you'd have to be a bit of a mind reader as well, because you'd need to be knowing like where things are going way ahead. I think that's just a really tricky, but it is an important conversation, an important point as well. So thank you so much for that. Another question: when we have space of creative power and agency, how do we avoid misrepresenting Muslim women or people who are different to us, especially given the lack of any positive representation and our own internalized issues? Oh yeah, and someone loves your waistcoat, by the way. Do you know what? I love it too. I don't know who that person is, but it's pretty slick.
Thanks. My mom hooked me up. She gave it to me just the other day.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more. How do we avoid misrepresenting Muslim women, people who are different to us, especially given the lack of any positive representation and our own internalized issues? Answer what you can from there if possible.
That is a great question. A very great question. And for me, again, as I was writing it, I had an exec who came in and was like, oh, it's great that you're representing marginalized voices, and then like disappeared. And I was sat there and I'm like, I'm doing what? And, there's sometimes the burden of that responsibility can just stop you from even putting pen to paper. And what I felt like I had to do constantly was to remind myself that I am just one voice speaking a very specific truth, and I have a very particular point of view, and that, and that is enough. And, you're right to say there's sort of inner demons, and I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or a brown woman or a Muslim woman, there's things that you worry, this need for acceptance and this worry of not to upset people, or am I, there's that kind of thing that I'm having to kind of also grapple with, and it's part of the process. You grapple with it. But, again, when I was thinking about this question of like responsibility and, having this incredible great fortune to get to speak my own truth and to get to create my art, and the thing that I realized I wanted to do was to be truthful to myself and to what I wanted to say, and to show that if you do finally get a platform and have a voice, that you don't have to hide or change yourself or kind of alter who you are and what you have to say because of a fear of what other people might say or think, because the truth is you can never represent such a diverse, group of people. If you try and represent everyone, you will fail because you can't. But that's why that thought and just reminding myself, like, I can't, allowed me to be like, what can I do? These women, my thoughts, what I think, and I know it's also difficult because sometimes when you're from a sort of marginalized community, or you feel like you feel a responsibility, and you feel, there is a kind of a sort of a tension and a stress that comes with it. But I think what we want, what true representation is when there's other voices. It can't just be one voice. We need sort of richness and like different kinds of representations of what it means to be a Muslim woman. There is no one size fits all. There is so many different ways of being, and what you might offer is a unique way of being, and one person, two people might see themselves in that, and that is a beautiful thing. So it's trying to kind of unburden yourself from a sort of a heavier sort of load, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting hearing you say that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think once you realize that you can't do everything that you'd want to see as well, I think that's a lot of it as well. Like, oh, I wish it was like this, and this. Once you realize that you can't do all of that and you can do your piece and part and be authentic in that, is, I think, a really key point. So thank you. We've only have 3 more minutes, so I'm just going to have to like run through these questions now. So Doctor Who is such an iconic show, and the episodes you directed really expand the Doctor Who universe. It introduced a female Black Doctor Who. What was the thinking behind that, and was it scary? If you can do that in a minute, that would be great. Sorry.
Okay, was it scary? It was so exciting. I knew this actor from when I was auditioning people for this other show, Jo Martin, and she was just someone who really, I thought, had elegance, grace, and also this really cool, like, badass vibe. The showrunner, Chris Chibnall, was super excited about her too. So it was just exciting for me. I think because I'm not a Whovian through and through, I didn't know how much this was going to shake up the kind of mythology. So I just got to be excited about it. Like, one of the most exciting things was that her iconic, the Doctor Who iconic coat, we had sort of African fabric. And that was just so exciting to be able to create a sort of Black female Doctor that has that in her kind of aesthetic is also beautiful. I was always really interested in how we were lighting the skin tone, making sure that she just looked sick all the time. So for me, it was just like pure excitement. My friend Vinay Patel wrote the script, so it was this added level of just like thrill. And to have 2 female doctors in a scene, which is the scene you saw, is one of my like directing highlights, to work with these 2 great women and to be like, what, women, brown women, Black women are allowed and should be accepted into genre, into science fiction.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And I'm really sorry I'm not able to go to all the questions now, but I'm just going to go for one more last one. Again, really sorry. I thought I left it, we did leave quite a lot of time on the 50 minutes. Sorry, everyone. But I just want to start to this because I think it's an incredibly important one. And I think as people in the creative industries, this is something that we're always thinking about. As we start to break through and have space in the creative industries, how can we make sure we bring our communities with us and not shut the door behind? Because we've obviously seen that, haven't I, with people who are older sometimes they get a bit territorial, but obviously it's not all like that. But yeah, how do we make sure we're bringing each other with us? What sort of things would have been good for you, or what did you see that was a great example? Just end on that, please.
Great question. Another really such a good question. Form alliances, I think, has been something I've realized have been really empowering, not only with people who are kind of ahead of you in your career, but with your peers. Like, find like create collectives. Like, I realize the power of like a collective group is so huge. That has been amazing for me. It is, what I've been trying to do is find like mentor other kind of directors of color, female Muslim directors, and kind of, again, bringing people onto set. So if you can do that, like that, for me, that's a great way of like showing the realities of directing. Because sometimes I think this idea that directing requires a kind of machismo sort of, swaggery vibe, which is like totally not my vibe. And just sort of demystifying, for me, it's like demystifying as much as you can the actual process, because that is one of the hardest things. Like, I want to make movies, but I know nothing about movies. So it's trying to get access or bringing people up and kind of demystifying what the actual job is and being like, this is the job. This is pretty straightforward. What else? Schools going. I think, we talk about sort of trying to, diversity in the arts and stuff, but I think so much work needs to happen at like a school level to be like, this industry is also for us. Because again, when I was growing up, I didn't see anyone really like me making movies, maybe one or two people doing a certain kind of thing. So it's, trying to, for me, I don't know, speak from my point of view, is like speaking to kind of kids at school and being like, no, this is something that you can do. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's perfect. No, that's good. Thank you so much. And you're right about like collectives and like mentoring, and it's all of, and as you said, like young people who are like at schools and things like that.
I just realized I was speaking so fast.
No. You can't speak. I'm like so fast. Well, now it's time that we need to finish now. I want to say thank you so much to the award-winning writer and director, Nida Manzoor. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chrystal, and thank you, Nida, for that generous, inspiring conversation. I think I'll definitely be rewatching this one. Thank you to our audiences and to the British Library and Unique Media and to the whole MFest team. This may be the end of our events for this weekend, but it is not the end of MFest. So please follow us online on social media at MFest UK and check out our website, www.mfest.org. And we'll be adding programming to the website for June and July. So if you subscribe there, you can keep up to date. Yes, I think that's all from us. So take care, everybody. Salams, and look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.